You know that moment when everyone around you loses their absolute mind over a game, and you're just standing there feeling nothing? Like you're watching people cry, scream, hug strangers, paint their entire bodies in team colors, and you're thinking, am I broken? Am I supposed to feel something right now? Here's what nobody tells you. That emptiness you feel when someone asks if you watched the game last night, that complete absence of excitement when your coworkers are debating playoff predictions, is not a flaw. Your brain might actually be wired in a way that most people will never understand. And what I'm about to explain will make you see every sports-obsessed person in your life completely differently. Let's just say it. Not caring about sports has probably made you feel like an outsider at some point. Maybe you've faked enthusiasm at a Super Bowl party. Maybe you've nodded along while someone passionately explains why their team's loss was devastating. Maybe you've wondered if there's something fundamentally missing in you, like everyone got invited to this massive human experience and somehow your invitation got lost. But here's the truth. You're not missing anything. You're just experiencing being human through a completely different lens. And that difference starts deep in your brain, in places you can't even consciously control. Think about what's actually happening when millions of people are emotionally shattered because 11 strangers they've never met lost a game. Their brains are doing something wild. When someone watches their team play, a chemical called oxytocin floods their system. You know oxytocin, right? It's the bonding hormone. The same thing that makes you love your family, that makes a mother feel connected to her baby, that makes you trust your closest friends. Their brain is literally tricking them into believing these millionaire athletes wearing matching shirts are part of their family. And it works. It works so well that grown adults will cry, will punch walls, will refuse to speak to their spouse for hours because strangers in another city failed to put a ball through a hoop enough times. But you, when you watch a game, if you ever even do, that chemical doesn't show up. Your brain looks at those players and thinks, yeah, those are just people doing their job.
No oxytocin surge.
No tribal connection. No feeling like you're part of something bigger. And for the longest time, psychologists thought this meant something was wrong with people like you. Lower social connection, maybe. Less empathy, perhaps. But they had it backwards. What's actually happening is that your brain has lower tribal instincts. And that's not a weakness. That's just a different way of being. For thousands of years, humans survived by being part of tribes. Your group protected you from predators, helped you find food, kept you alive through brutal winters. Being loyal to your tribe wasn't a choice. It was survival. And sports? They're basically modern tribes. Same colors, same chance, same us versus them mentality, just with better stadiums and worse food prices. When someone's team wins, their brain experiences it as a tribal victory. Safety, dominance, success. Ancient wiring lighting up for a completely modern, completely meaningless scenario. But people who don't care about sports, their brains simply aren't as responsive to that tribal signal. They don't need to belong to a group to feel complete. They don't automatically hate the other team just because they're wearing different colors. There's actual research on this. People with low sports interest show way less of that us versus them thinking. They can watch a game, if they even bother, and not feel anything personal about the outcome. No anger at the referee. No hatred for the opposing fans. Just indifference.
Pure, neutral indifference.
Now here's where it gets a little dark, and honestly a little addictive to understand. What's happening in a sports fan's brain during a game looks eerily similar to what happens in a gambling addict's brain at a casino. You know that feeling right before you open a birthday present? That electric anticipation? That's dopamine. And sports fans get hit after hit after hit of it during games. Every play, every shot, every moment of uncertainty. Will they score? Will they miss? Will the other team come back? There's a constant drip of anticipation and reward. Researchers have done brain scans on this. They put sports fans in fMRI machines and showed them their team playing. The same reward centers that light up for gambling, for drugs, for other highly addictive behaviors, they all fire up. And here's the key. The uncertainty is what makes it powerful. If you knew your team would win every time, it would get boring fast. But you don't know. And that unpredictability keeps the dopamine flowing. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement. It's the most addictive reward schedule ever discovered. It's why slot machines are designed the way they are. It's why people can't stop checking their phones for notifications. And it's why someone will watch every single game their team plays, even when they're having the worst season in franchise history. Your brain, if you don't care about sports, it just doesn't respond to that trigger. You watch a game and the dopamine doesn't come. It's not that you can't feel excitement. You absolutely can. You just don't feel it for vicarious competition. And this might actually be genetic. There's research suggesting that variations in your dopamine receptor genes can literally predict how much you'll care about watching other people compete. Think about that for a second. Your complete and total indifference to whether some team wins or loses might be written into your DNA. You were never going to care. You never had a choice. And honestly, that's kind of beautiful because it means you can stop feeling guilty about it. There's this thing sports fans do that's fascinating and a little sad if you really think about it. When their team wins, they say, "We won. We played amazing. We dominated." But when their team loses, suddenly it's, "They lost. They choked. They didn't show up." Notice the pronoun switch? Psychologists call this basking in reflected glory. When things go well, they absorb the success into their identity. When things go badly, they distance themselves from the failure. It's a protection mechanism for their self-esteem. And it works. Sports fans get to experience victory without actually doing anything. They get to feel successful because strangers were successful. But people who don't obsess over sports, they don't play that game. Their self-concept is more stable. They don't need external victories to feel good about themselves. Their self-esteem isn't riding on things completely outside their control. And there's something quietly powerful about that. Their mood on Monday morning doesn't depend on whether a team won on Sunday night. Now, I need to say something that might sound contradictory, but stay with me because it explains so much. Sports fans often score higher on certain empathy measures. They practice caring deeply about strangers. They feel genuine pain when a player gets injured. They feel joy when an underdog succeeds. So the question is, why don't you feel that? Why doesn't your heart break when the backup quarterback finally gets his moment and then fails? It's not that you have less empathy. You just allocate it differently. Everyone has a limited capacity for caring deeply. You can't care about everything. It's impossible. So your brain makes choices. Sports fans pour their empathy into teams and players. You pour yours somewhere else. Maybe into social causes. Maybe into your actual relationships with people who know you exist. Maybe into creative projects, intellectual challenges, understanding how the world works. Studies have found that people with low sports interest often score way higher in something called openness to experience. They're more interested in art, in music, in ideas, in beauty. They're getting the same things sports fans get. Meaning, connection, transcendence, emotional highs. They're just finding it in completely different places. Neither is better. They're just different paths to the same human needs. And let's be really honest about something else because I think this matters. For some of you, not caring about sports isn't just a neutral preference. It's a defense mechanism. Maybe you were the kid picked last in gym class. Maybe you felt excluded by sports culture your entire childhood. Maybe you're pushing back against the aggressive, sometimes toxic competitiveness that often comes with sports fandom. Maybe you watched people you respected lose their minds over games and thought, "I never want to be like that." Maybe you just never understood why grown adults scream at televisions over a ball, and the confusion turned into rejection. Your indifference might have a backstory. Trauma might be too strong a word, but negative associations? Absolutely. Or maybe, and this is just as valid, you find it genuinely boring. You've tried watching games. You've given it honest chances. And every time your brain just checks out. Nothing clicks. No excitement arrives. And that's okay. You're allowed to find something boring without having a deep psychological reason. But here's what explains almost everything about why sports fans and non-sports people sometimes feel like they're speaking different languages. It comes down to how you experience meaning. Sports fans find meaning in narrative. The underdog story, the dynasty, the rivalry that spans decades, the comeback in the final second. It's compelling to them because it's unpredictable. Real drama, real stakes, real consequences, at least in their minds. People who don't care about sports, they look at that same narrative and think, but why would I emotionally invest in an outcome I cannot control, performed by people who don't know I exist, in a game that has zero impact on my actual life? And they're not wrong, but neither are sports fans. It's just two completely different approaches to the human need for story. One group finds epic narrative in a championship run. The other finds it in a novel, in their own life journey, in a relationship, in a creative project, in a scientific breakthrough. Same need, different source. And the difference matters because sports fans invest emotional energy in one-sided relationships. They know everything about these players, they defend them online, they buy their jerseys, they care deeply, but the relationship only goes one direction. The players don't know they exist. The team doesn't care about them individually. For non-sports people, they prefer investing that energy where there's reciprocity, where their care actually matters, where they're participants, not spectators. They want to be in the arena, not watching from the stands. Neither approach is superior. They're just different strategies for navigating what it means to be human. There's a psychologist named Csikszentmihalyi who studied something called flow states. Those moments when you're so absorbed in something that time disappears. Hours feel like minutes. You're completely present, completely engaged. He found that people can achieve flow through thousands of different activities. For some people, watching sports creates that state. They're completely absorbed in the game. For others, it's literally anything else. Painting, coding, having a deep conversation, building something with their hands, reading a book that changes how they see the world. Your brain is capable of that same transcendent experience. You're just not finding it in sports. And that's not a loss. That's just your path. Here's something nobody wants to say out loud, but it's worth considering. People who don't obsess over sports often report feeling more present in their own lives. They're not spending 3 hours every Sunday experiencing someone else's struggle. They're engaged in their own. They're not living vicariously through athletes. They're actually living. There's something quietly radical about that in a culture that celebrates passive consumption. In a world where we're constantly told to watch, to follow, to consume other people's achievements, choosing to focus on your own existence is almost rebellious. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what your brain has been trying to tell you all along. That your life, your story, your actual experiences, they matter more than any game ever could. So what does all of this actually mean for you? If you don't care about sports, you're not missing out on some fundamental human experience. You're not broken. You're not boring. You're not socially deficient. Your brain's reward system is just calibrated differently. Your tribal instincts work differently. Your empathy flows in different directions. And every single bit of that is not just okay. It's exactly as valid as the person who paints their face and screams at a television for 3 hours. The next time someone asks, "Did you see the game?" and you genuinely could not care less, you don't have to feel apologetic. You don't have to pretend. You can just know that you're playing a different game. One that's entirely yours. One that might just maybe have higher stakes because it's actually about your life, not someone else's. If this resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you're wired just a little differently than everyone around you, you might want to understand why quiet people process the world in ways that loud people never will, and why that might be your biggest advantage in a world that never stops talking. This channel exists to explain human behavior in ways that actually make sense, without the academic nonsense, without making you feel broken for being different. So if you want more of that, if you want to understand yourself and everyone around you just a little better, subscribe. Because we're just getting started on explaining why you think the way you do.